Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome in. In this one, I wanted to really ask the question here, should Mike LaFleur be brought back in 2023 as the Jets offensive coordinator? We've watched this team all season and it is totally clear that it has been carried by the defense. Right, Quinnen Williams looking like an absolute all-pro, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, CJ Mosley racking up a ton of tackles, Quan Alexander, Quincy Williams, the list goes on. This defense, led by Saleh and Ulbrich, has really carried the load all season. It's been the offense lagging behind, trying to catch up, trying to play complementary football almost week to week, right? Some weeks the offense has scored some points and they looked formidable, but most of the time it's the defense playing really well and the offense trying to catch up or trying to duplicate that type of performance. It's frustrating. I mean, Jets fans, we all know this at this point. Quarterback problems. There was a ton of issues on the offensive side of the football. And when we ask the question, who's at fault here, Mike LaFleur definitely shoulders a lot of the blame, because it's not like Saleh has a lot of offensive input. It's not like he's calling offensive plays. It's not like he's really doing a ton offensively. It's Mike LaFleur's show. It's his offense, it's his play calls, it's his game plan. It's his job to develop the quarterback position. We haven't really seen that out of Zach Wilson, although that's obviously not 100% on LaFleur. Only time will tell if Zach Wilson will pan out as an actual NFL quarterback. But when I look at Mike LaFleur and I ask the question, where does he fall when we grade and analyze his position amongst the 31 other offensive coordinators in football? Is he in the cream of the crop, the top 5, the top 10? No, absolutely not. Not a chance, in my opinion. I personally have major issue. I have a lot of issues with LaFleur. We're going to get into them. Is he a top 10 OC? No. Is he a bottom 5 OC? I would probably have to say no. Bottom 10, though, that's where I feel like LaFleur kind of lies. He's not the worst. He's not the best. Clearly, he's not the best. I would say he's somewhere between 22 and, 29, somewhere in that range. And to me right now, I'm looking at this team. The defense is this is a playoff caliber defense. This is a legit unit. Have they came into play every single week? No. But I feel totally comfortable with this defense moving forward. If the Jets don't make any changes at all, right? Just bringing back the guys on one-year contracts. It's not perfect. I do think there could be some improvements, but hypothetically speaking, if they roll this same defense out there next year, I would feel great. I wouldn't really have a ton of complaints. But offensively, I have some issues, right? I have some questions that I don't feel comfortable with going into 2023 unanswered. Right, these are some big question marks here that, quite frankly, don't sit well with me. And most of them start with Mike LaFleur. Let's start with game planning. We have to ask the question, what makes for a bad offensive game plan? To me, one issue that's really high up on that list, one definition, if you will, is constantly coming out slow and falling right on your face. Punt, turnover, punt, 3 and out, everybody looking confused, nobody really having any sort of rhythm or consistency whatsoever to start games off. If this is a problem multiple times throughout the year, to me, that falls on the offensive coordinator's shoulders. Of course, we could point to the players to, go. They are the ones running the plays. Those are the guys that have to execute. I get that, but when the New York Jets are when any offense is starting off slow, I mean, think about this season alone. The games were littered with slow starts. Go back to last year. Games were littered with slow starts. So this has been an issue that has transcended 1 year. So we're now in year 2 of the Mike LaFleur era as OC and play caller, and this team continues to start slow. That is an issue for me. Because, year 1, I get it. I personally, I'll give LaFleur a pass. But in year 2, where Joe Douglas invested tons of money, tons of draft picks into this squad, I don't want to see the Jets start off slow and go 3. Of course, credit the defense. Sometimes they make plays. Sometimes opposing coordinators are ahead of the curve a little bit. Give those guys credit. But when this is a problem week after week, year after year, it just doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well. So that's one issue. The game planning side, to me, I have a major red flag with. Number two, play calls. I think it's pretty obvious that Mike LaFleur will deviate away from the running game if it's not working early on. And, we look at his role with the 49ers. He is kind of a pass-first guy, passing game coordinator with San Fran. I don't think it's a coincidence that Joe Flacco, a backup quarterback, Joe Flacco led the NFL in attempts through the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, he was throwing like 49 times, over 50 times in one game. Just unbelievable. I think there really needs to be an emphasis on running the rock and just staying committed to it, because it's not just like a gain of one, a gain of two, a loss of one, loss of two, that, play's not going anywhere. It forces defenders to wrap up and tackle. You're keeping the clock running, you're controlling time of possession, and over time, if you stick with it and you get to the fourth quarter, the defensive linemen, if that squad isn't deep, they're going to be beat up. They're going to be beat up by having to, and what's crazy is the Jets have fresh legs. Michael Carter, Breece Hall, James Robinson, Bam Knight, Ty Johnson. We saw him emerge against the Seattle Seahawks. Like, the Jets have multiple guys here that can carry some of the load, and it just seems like some of the, and this kind of ties into game planning too. I don't mean to rant, but let's look at the Seahawks game. One of the worst defenses against the run. Ty Johnson has 40-something, leads the team with 40-something rushing yards. Week before that, Jacksonville, no Travon Walker, no Foley Fatukasi. We don't really run the ball effectively. Who do we play before that? Lions didn't really run the ball effectively. And of course, Breece Hall is hurt. Breece Hall is tremendous. I love Breece Hall. Absolutely love him. But again, the Jets have depth. The Jets have some solid pieces at the running back position. And also, Joe Douglas, why is I get that Breece is a great player, but why is the offense solely focused on one rookie running back? I get it. Feed Breece Hall. He's going to score points. He's going to carry the rock, and he's going to make plays. That's what Breece Hall does. But when he got hurt, the offense just fell apart. And, you look at, to me, that also falls on Joe Douglas's shoulders, because at the end of the day, he brought in Corey Davis on a multi-year deal. He brought back Braxton Berrios on a multi-year deal. He signed Tyler Conklin, multi-year deal. CJ Uzomah, multi-year deal. Top 10 pick in Garrett Wilson, second round pick in Denzel Mims, second round pick in Elijah Moore. This team has talent. You're not signing guys in free agency to multi-year deals if you don't believe in them, if they're prove-it deals, if you don't really think they're going to fit the offense, fit the culture, they're just kind of depth pieces. You're not going to bring a guy in for 3 years. You're not going to offer that 3-year contract, especially, these guys who have had, multiple teams in the market for them. It's not just like, the Jets are just going to give a player a chance. So to me, although Joe Douglas is to blame, I just don't understand how once Breece Hall went down, it just seemed like the offense just fell apart. The Jets have talent here. What was the point of bringing all these guys in if the offense was going to look anemic without the rookie running back in Breece Hall? Just frustrating stuff. And the running game is, of course, tied to the offensive line production. If you can't block well, you can't run the football well. And the Jets have been completely inconsistent on the O-line as well, with injuries, guys swapping in, changing positions. AVT gets hurt, who is just an anchor on this O-line. Just a great pillar. We need him to play on the left side, on the right side, tackle guard, doesn't matter. Vera Tucker's got it. Bottom line, when the O-line is playing well, chances are the running backs are also playing well. But to me, I just wish LaFleur would just stick with the running game a little bit more throughout the games. I think when it's all said and done, to me, the 2022 New York Jets offense, there's one word to describe it. It's inconsistency. It's an inconsistent bunch. Inconsistent game planning, inconsistent play calls, inconsistency on the offensive line, inconsistent with injuries, inconsistent at the wide receiver and tight end position. Sometimes it looked like CJ Uzomah was just inactive, in the first chunk of the season. Like, it just didn't even seem like he was involved whatsoever. Trying to utilize Elijah Moore when they're trying to force feed the ball to Braxton Berrios. Like, these points were brought up by tons and tons and tons of people. To me, I really think the only consistent member of the Jets wide receiver pass catching core was Garrett Wilson, who was a top 10 pick, so just an inconsistent group. So going back to the initial question here, should the Jets bring Mike LaFleur back for 2023? I think when you ask a question like this, whenever you're talking about firing a guy, there has to be a plan in place to get better. Personally, I've never been the type of guy to want to fire somebody and say, okay, great, you know what, he's gone, now what do we do? Right now, what's the plan? I think if the Jets want to, and when I say Jets, I mean everybody, Woody Johnson, Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, everybody in that building, if those guys want to part ways with Mike LaFleur after the season and want to upgrade at the offensive coordinator spot, two things have got to happen. Number one, there has to be complete conviction within the organization that whoever they go out and get is 100% going to be an upgrade. So there has to be that conviction there. I know the big name right now is Frank Reich. So again, if Saleh, if Joe Douglas, if they want Frank Reich, not only do they just have to have 100% conviction that he is going to be better than Mike LaFleur and that he's going to run that offense more effectively and get more production, because if they let Mike LaFleur go, they bring in somebody else and the offense looks worse, there's going to be major problems. The fan base will not put up with that. That's for sure. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two, if the Jets part ways with LaFleur, they have to have almost a guarantee that they'll go out and land that number one candidate. Nobody wants to be in a position where they go out and they fire a guy. Doesn't matter if he's an offensive coordinator or not. You could be a QB coach, a defensive coordinator, doesn't matter. If you are firing an individual with the hopes of bringing in one, maybe a second guy, like one or two different options, and you don't land them, and now you're in a position where it's like, what do we do? Like, we can't go, hire LaFleur back, so I don't want the Jets to be SOL, if you will. So I think those are the two big question marks, the two big the two guarantees that must happen for the Jets if they want to make this move. Now, in the defense of LaFleur, there was a bunch of injuries all over the place. We said it before with Becton, Dwayne Brown missing time, Elijah Moore missing time, Zach Wilson, so many storylines, so much drama with this offense. So LaFleur was dealing with a lot personnel-wise, the constant switching and everything like that. And also, we take a look at Jeff Ulrich last season, 32nd worst defensive football, 32 out of 32. He was brought back by this Jet squad, completely flipped the narrative, turned the tables on everybody. Jets have a top 5 defense in football. So, I'm not saying that next season the Jets are going to have a top 5 offense or anything like that, but I do think when we're talking about young coaches overall, time helps, and offseason helps big time. And I think if you keep LaFleur in place, the Jets are major contenders in the Jimmy Garoppolo market, in the Derek Carr market. These are quarterbacks that realistically could be wearing green next season. So if you're in favor of trying to go get a Jimmy or a Derek, I think you might kind of want to keep LaFleur as the OC. So if you're in favor of going out and getting a Jimmy or a Derek, you probably want to keep LaFleur right where he's at as offensive coordinator and say, hey, you know what? Let's give it another roll, year 3, and see if there's any sort of improvements, and then reassess at the end of next year. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't love LaFleur. I don't hate him as well. I don't think he's a bottom feeder. Like, he's not some horrible OC. There's things that I really like about his system. And at times I am impressed with the play calling, but I do have some issues. I do have some pretty big red flags with LaFleur that I want to see cleaned up. So if the Jets part ways with him, I'm expecting a big name. I'm expecting somebody that will come in and really get this offense turned around. And if the Jets hang on to LaFleur, I understand it. But I do expect changes to be made at either the quarterback position or the OC. I don't see a situation where the Jets keep LaFleur, keep Zach Wilson, try to re-sign Mike White and Joe Flacco and just run this thing back into next year. I think a major change at either spot is going to happen. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, go Jets.